Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Collinwood, back with another Dark Shadows video for you guys and gals. I'm here to talk about the difference between Victoria Winters going back in time and Jonathan Frid's Barnabas Collins going to 1970 parallel time. What are the major differences and some similarities? Obviously, man, woman, mortal, human. Victoria Winters is mortal. Jonathan Frid's Barnabas is a vampire who is going to a alternate reality, a parallel time. Uh, Victoria Winters, as you all well know, unless you're not a Dark Shadows fan, goes back by seance. They're conducting a seance. It's Dr. Julia Hoffman, Elizabeth Collins' daughter, Roger Collins, Victoria Winters, Barnabas, Carolyn, Julia. I think I've already said Julia, but so these people are at this table and they're all holding hands and they're holding a seance to contact the ghost of Sarah Collins. And as you know, Carolyn tries to fake it, and then the ghost of Sarah goes into Vicky and she starts speaking through her. And this causes a black as she's speaking, and Sarah's going back out of Vicky's body. There's a blackout. Lights come back on. There's Phyllis Wick, who is from 1795, and Victoria Winters is no longer there. It's important to note her journey to 1795, in which, again, I'm covering by episode with Christine Pierce, Cara Tillies, Patrick McRae, Gordon Domowski, that this woman never time traveled before this. So, Christine Pierce and Cara Tilly, shout out to them. I'll link to the channel will be in the description box. Once asked me, about time travel and stuff. I think they asked me what the difference was. And you gotta understand, even at this time, when you look at early movies about time travel and stuff, most of that, there was some sort of mechanism, there was some sort of machine that used time travel. When you look at future events of filmmaking, etc., we look at a movie like Back to the Future, a trilogy. And I often look at Back to the Future and I do sort of compare it with Vicky's going back in time. Here's why. Because it's a great comparison. There's a large difference between Victoria Winters and Marty McFly. Marty McFly, he knew, or at least he found out very quickly, that Doc Brown was building the time machine. He found out that Doc Brown had turned a DeLorean into a time machine. If you go 88 miles an hour and you have a flux capacitor, you're gonna see some serious shit, right? You're gonna go back in time, Back to the Future. There's a difference between a character knowing that the ability, if you will, of time travel is possible, compared to a character not knowing. And I'm going to get into Barnabas's parallel time thing here too. Don't worry. I don't know how long this video is going to be. Because anytime I say this is going to be a long video, it ends up being 20 minutes. So we'll see. But it's important to note that when Victoria Winters goes back in time, there's a lot of things to take in consideration. Yes, this character has never time traveled before. Everybody gets, a lot of DS fans get on Victoria for, oh, she just, they make fun of her because she just didn't understand. My question is, how do you want a character who's never time traveled to understand time travel, who's never heard, uh, you know, who's never experienced the matter. I mean, what even if time travel was wrote about within the Dark Shadows universe, not that we hear that it is, but let's say it was, and Vicky read something about it, but never said about it. Well, it's probably in a fictitious sense. So just because, and we again, not that that happened. Here's a character who, doesn't it, for her it doesn't has no reason to believe in time travel. Sure, she's experienced a ghost. She's experienced a supernatural entity in the Phoenix. Barnabas travels forward in time from 1970 or sorry uh, from the 1700s, late 1700s to the 1960s, the late 1960s to 1967 more specifically. And I say that because Barnabas is aware that he's come forward in time. But when you look at both time travelers for this instance, when Barnabas gets out of his coffin, he doesn't talk about how things have changed from a technology standpoint. From a there were no there weren't telephones in Barnabas's era, not yet anyway. So there weren't automobiles in Barnabas's time. There weren't airplanes. None of that existed. Yeah, sure, there were ships, there were boats. I mean, could Barnabas understand how things have come so far? Sure, because here's a guy who worked at a shipyard. I mean, his family's owns ships. His father, you know, again, shipyard. So maybe he understood that a lot better because of having that job. We don't know. He could have. So maybe he didn't need to wander in all the glory of the future technology. Maybe the writers didn't feel that was important enough. I don't blame them because the character is still interesting as hell. Jonathan Frid got that character over so fast. Amazing, amazing actor. Fred was. I mean, you know, I could go on, but I'm trying to also look at the two characters and their difference. So Barnabas, who's a vampire, who's aware of supernatural abilities, who knows what his supernatural abilities are, knows he's come forward in time. Victoria Winters doesn't realize she's gone backwards in time. Why should she? She's not a vampire, she's a mortal human being. And when she sees Barnabas, she just thinks she's being teased. Um, she isn't. And then once she realizes that, you know, this is not a dream, then the terror is real. With Barnabas, from a parallel, it's important to note that there was no exchange with Barnabas in parallel time. Nobody came, that we know of, nobody came out the parallel time room and swapped places with Barnabas. There was none of that. The parallel time room was a room in the East Wing that you see people standing in, and you see you see Julia Hoffman, but she's not a doctor; she's a servant. You see Nancy Barrett's character Carolyn Collins, but she's Carolyn Loomis. She's married to Willie Loomis. And Willie isn't Jason McGuire's Willie. It's William Hollinshead Loomis, um, who's a writer. When we met, our Willie Loomis was a thief. This guy's a writer. He didn't. Um, Quentin Collins is is not a werewolf. He's not from he's not from the past. He's descended from another Quentin, and he this Quentin in this parallel time has married Maggie Evans. Now we, the audience, know all this. There, the similarities here is between Vicky and Barnabas. What Vicky believes about the past is how romantic it is. That's something we learn about her. But as Joan Bennett's Elizabeth puts it to her, maybe it is time to open up the books and look into the past. And maybe once you start to learn about it, you'll realize that the past wasn't so romantic. It was very terrifying and real. And that's Elizabeth's warning to Vicky. Again, and to be clear, Elizabeth didn't give that warning knowing Vicky would go back into the past. No, Elizabeth didn't know that. She just gave it to her because think of Elizabeth's history in itself. Think of her past. And think of things that Elizabeth hasn't just been living at Collinwood for 18 years. She's been living there her whole life. She's the head of the household. She's been raised by Jameson, the young man we saw in 1897, who was played by David Hennessy as a kid. She knows, you know, some of the family history. Again, though the Collins family history book isn't the most accurate, she has at least heard things from Jameson that how terrifying the past really was. And so has Roger. Even though Roger was a little bit more interested in history than maybe Elizabeth was. But they both have a interest in the Collins family history. Both know about it. Maybe Roger knows a little more because he's researched a little more than what Elizabeth has. But Elizabeth has done her own research. Remember, again, I'm not trying to get off topic, but I'm trying to get in all my points here. Remember, Elizabeth, when we first meet Barnabas Collins, uh, when you know, in when Elizabeth at least first meets him in episode 212, she says about, well, I always thought that Barnabas went to England and died. That's what she was told, or heard, or read in the Collins film history books. But as Barnabas puts it, well, the family history books didn't tell of his marriage, and considering the communication in those days, they probably got separated, which made sense. Barnabas's explanation, though a lie, isn't completely a lie. Yeah, a family could get separated by those times because communication was by letter, wasn't by telephone at that point in time. And by the time telephone got invented, you could have forgotten about your ancestor who went to England. That's a possibility. We know it's bullshit, but still. it's all in good fun, right? So the similarity is, I said that Vicky thinks the past is romantic. It's not. She's hopeful for the past, right? She's romanticized by it. Barnabas is romanticized by parallel time in every way. When he reads William Holland's Ted Lewis, The Life and Death of Barnabas Collins. He feels that if he goes into this parallel time room, this will present a new opportunity for him to live life normally, not as a vampire. He thinks by some weird way of going into this room and somehow being able to be part of that alternate reality, he will no longer be a vampire because there is a Barnabas who was not a vampire, who married Josette. He thinks he'll just take that somehow, some way, he'll be free of this curse. So, like Victoria, he's romanticized by the idea of going to another place in time, especially another time band. Um, Now, the way he gets there, again, when the room goes dark, sometimes it goes completely dark. Like the furniture disappears, the people disappear, it goes completely dark when the people aren't in it. It's all lit up when the people are in it. Um, and Julia Hoffman knows about this room. Quentin knows about this room. Megan Todd found the room first. Um, it's interesting. I love Jonathan Fred's words before he goes. He's standing in the room by himself, and he wants to go back so bad, but it's not happening for him. And he just realizes, God, I've been a fool. And you can tell when Fred says that, it's so believable. The greatest thing about a character is not just the truth they tell about themselves, but it's about the flaws they reveal about themselves and the human flaws they have. Yes, Barnabas is a vampire, but the other thing he has in common with Vicky, even though he's a vampire, his flaws are very human. And they should be, because deep down that's what he is. And in fact, even though he's a vampire, at heart he's a human being. He has unless you mess with, the only way Barnabas is going to kill you is if you mess with him. And don't do that. So, but so he's standing there, and he closes his eyes and he says, "What a fool I've been, Julia." And then his eyes open and the room's changed, and he's in 1970 parallel time. He has gotten his wish. But just like Victoria, and here's where he's about to realize how really different this reality is to his own. His portrait doesn't hang in the foyer. He, to everybody in parallel time, Barnabas Collins does not have a son named Barnabas. He had a son named Bramwell, who we're gonna meet not in 1970 but in 1841. And here, when he meets Carolyn, she tells him, your portrait isn't in the foyer. He bites her, and what's really impressive is how different everybody really is. That's really the great job of the actors in 1970 parallel time. Same thing with 1795, how different the characters are. Or sorry, these characters are different in 1970 parallel time, and the characters are different in 1795. Because in 1795, it's not Elizabeth, it's not Roger, it's Liz and Roger are brother and sister. Joshua and Naomi are husband and wife, and Joshua rules the house. The women do not rule the house in 1795. Joshua and Naomi's marriage was arranged in their time. Obviously 1970 people pick their husbands and wives just like now. I talked about human error. What I mean by human, that I love that Barnabas thinks his life is going to change because it's an error. It's when the best way to make a show or a movie feel real, to really connect with an audience who's watching your product, is to make the character be wrong. If they're right all the time, it's not real. And Barnabas is not right all the time. And a lot of times he's rarely right. And it makes that character all the more real. Yes, he's a vampire. Yes, vampires aren't real. Yes, I know that. But the character comes across as realistic. And that is one of the most important things the writers in Frid really did, in my opinion. And so did every other actor on the show. They made their characters realistic. If they were right all the time, you'd be like, oh, come on, that's really, you'd sort of walk away from it. You wouldn't want to watch it, maybe. I know I wouldn't, but that's just me. I don't want to watch something where the character's right all the time. I want a mix of the character says something, they believe that it's true, and they fall flat on their face. Not literally, but metaphorically. They're wrong. They're proven wrong. And then they come to the realization of being wrong. And you see that continuously in Dark Shadows. And in my opinion, this is a lost art in a lot of places. It really is. It's more specific with the Halloween franchise. Um, sorry. I'll try to concentrate. So I've talked about the similarities, I've talked about some of the differences, but here's the real biggest difference too. While Barnabas believes his life is going to change, that he's not going to be a vampire, he knows he's going to find out he's wrong. He finds out real quick he's wrong. He bites Catherine's character. I also think too, or sorry, not Catherine's character, Nancy Barrett's character, Carolyn. Apologies. But I also think too, when Barnabas stepped through parallel time, he realized that nothing changed for him being a vampire. Maybe he felt he could leave Collinsport. He never does. He doesn't leave. In fact, he gets William Hollinshead Loomis sees the bite marks on his wife, Carolyn Loomis, and he chains Barnabas up. He holds the cross, and he chains him up. This happens for for a reason I will explain if you're not a Dark Shadows fan. By this time, filming had began on the first Dark Shadows movie, House of Dark Shadows. So you're not going to see Jonathan Fritz Barnabas for a while, for a lot of episodes. Which, by the way, everybody did a great job carrying the show. They really did. The show was very interesting. You don't get that in 1795. It's not that Victoria Winters disappears, but Victoria Winters does get tried as a witch. Are Barnabas and, Victoria Winters' journeys terrifying? Yes, but both for different reasons. Both, in a sense, become prisoners. Victoria in a jail cell, Barnabas in his coffin. There's a similarity there. Again, the biggest difference is really Barnabas when he's let out for these. And here's what's going on too with William Hollinshead Loomis. Remember I said William Hollinshead Loomis is a writer? William is taking notes from Barnabas. He's writing a whole new book on Barnabas Collins. And he's interviewing him as he's writing. Does that sound a little familiar to anybody? Interview with a vampire. That's what William is doing. He's interviewing a vampire. Again, and this is before all that. This is before all that. It's amazing what Dark Shadows helped inspire, right? But it's cool. It's really cool. I love it. The characters. Another key thing too. I talked about Victoria Winters is tried as a witch. The reason is, in 1795, we know Angelique is the real witch, and that's also Barnabas's wife. Barnabas obviously shoots Angelique, realizing she's a witch, doesn't kill her, only gets her in the shoulder, and she curses him to be a vampire. That's how the curse happens. In this 1970 parallel time, the Angelique that is here, or that will be here, is not Barnabas's Angelique at all. But Barnabas, being the old fox that he is, being the pro of, you got to think about the experiences here. Vicky's supernatural experiences have been ghost and a phoenix. She doesn't know Barnabas is a vampire until he bites. Then she knows, but she never tells. She never tells. Uh, she she says she forgot. She forgot it. Her and Carolyn forget Barnabas is a vampire. That's how they treat it, which I just find amazing. Um, with this, eh, Barnabas being in 1970 parallel time, and then when he finally when Will turns his back on him, he takes the cross and chokes him with it, and he bites Will, turning Will and his wife Carolyn into his servants to watch his coffin during the day, and they do. Barnabas is free, but Barnabas does not leave. He does not leave Collinsport or Collinwood. He begins a slow investigation into the events that have happened around him. That he doesn't know they've fully happened, but he begins hearing about things that have been going on. And here's a man with super who no one knows is a vampire in 1970. Nobody knows that this man has these supernatural powers. One of my all-time favorite scene in 1970 parallel time is when Jonathan Fred walks into Angelique's room, looks at Angelique's portrait, and says, "Show me the eyes of Angelique." And my God, that scene gets me every time. I really enjoy the hell out of it. Um, and it mystifies the 1970 parallel time Angelique. It would not have mystified our Angelique. It's just like, really? Really? You need to confirm I'm a witch? No, you don't. Barnabas wouldn't have had to do that for his Angelique. Um, that's what I'm basically saying. But also, too, when you look at 1795, you could say, how does somebody marry somebody and not know they're a witch? I think one of the biggest similarities between 1795 and Barnabas is Barnabas, he really tries to see good in people too, unless you're a Trask. But there's nothing good about a Trask. I mean, let's be honest. Uh, so there's this video's going long. And remember, he hears Angelique speaking a spell in her old servants' quarters as he's walking down the hall. He's on the other side of the house where she is, where Angelique is. And he says, Angelique, she didn't hear him. She was in such a trance, which I love, by the way. A great scene. Forcing Vicky to leave the house and running into Reverend Traska's arm. And he says, I got the witch, I got the witch. Because he's performing something as well to drive her out the house. Um, it's just amazing job. And he finally starts realizing, oh my God, I think Angelique's the real witch. And he tells Ben, who can't say the witch's name, I taught you how to write her name. And he writes a V, what looks like a V. He says V for Victoria. And anytime, Barnabas has said the words Victoria Winters is the witch, Ben, no, no, no. He keeps going, no. And Barnabas already knows deep down who the witch is. He just wants the confirmation by the time he talks to Ben. And then Ben makes a V, and then he makes the line across for the A. A for Angelique. And it's a great scene. Victoria obviously makes it back from 1795 without being lynched. She's got the burn marks to prove she almost was. Wrote burn marks. Barnabas makes it back to from 1970. But he also makes it back from 1970 with an assist. Because somebody comes to help him. Dr. Julia Hoffman kills her own doppelganger and replaces her. And almost gets killed herself by Angelique. Doesn't, but still. That too, and Barnabas Barnabas battles a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde type character. Um, I really enjoy the psychology of parallel time. I do, I do look, as much as I enjoy it, the story of parallel time. I do wish Barnabas would have left Collinsport. It would have been fun to see what Barnabas's life would have been by taking, you know, to a married couple with him to overlook his coffin. Um, we didn't get that, but still, the story we got was really interesting because here's a character who thought, even though I'm a vampire, I'm going to have a different life. And no, you didn't really. You didn't really have a different life. Your life remained the same. You just went on a different kind of adventure with a different type of Collins family. And though the adventure was cool and fun, he also met a character named Roxanne Drew, who he fell head over heels in love with. By the way, I loved Roxanne Drew as a character. One of my favorite vampires ever was Roxanne Drew, because of the way they did her, the very mysterious vampire. You didn't know who it was. I'm trying to think if I missed anything. I don't think I did. Oh, I talked about Victoria Winters replacing Phyllis Wick. Remember, Phyllis Wick did not go to jail until the night they carried Barnabas's coffin to the mausoleum. So Phyllis Wick knew for sure Barnabas died. Barnabas was not pronounced dead when Victoria Winters went to jail. Barnabas was still very much alive and walking. Nobody knew, the curse had not happened yet. So I think what we have to, and this is sort of my question to all of you too, do you think the curse happens a lot sooner with Phyllis Wick? It definitely happens I don't think it happens that differently. I do think that there's gunfire that she gets that Angelique gets shot. So that's my question. I hope you I hope you all enjoyed this video. You all have a wonderful, wonderful night.